Now.
Okay, so we're just going to go over how to create. This is a form with some HTML or CSS styling in it. This is very simple, and in our example here, we are looking at a form that is a custom form, so it has 100% custom fields on it. You can also do this in other forms in our system that are native, such as a project request form or a project status page or task status page, whatever it is. So in this case, I have a very simple form. This is called in our system a tactical form. This is just a demo form that I made from scratch. And you can see that I've got the title of this, which is typically what we refer to as name. In this case, I made it say title. And then we've got a couple of sections to our form. We've got this general information where we want the person requesting, the requester's email and phone, a little bit of a description, a reason for the change request, other details, if you select other right here. And then we have another section which is for tracking this tactical form if we end up creating a project or a task off it. So I put a number of different fields on here. So the way I like to do these things while I'm creating them, because sometimes it's a little trial and error, is to open up 3 tabs of the same site. So on this tab, I have a form, which is in its final form, in its display form. And then I will have a form that is in the edit mode. And then I will have the customization, either user-defined field, or in this case, it's my custom fields on a custom item, which I call tactical request. So here are my fields. And if we look at the form itself, you can kind of see all those fields on this page. So the first thing I wanted to do is a normal field, which is called title. I made it the item name. I can change, obviously, the name, just to call it name, and save that. So the next thing I see on my form is that I've got this kind of separator header bar called general information. What I did to create that is go into this particular row. I called it general information, and I selected as the input control read only text. So off of here, it's near the text box control. Then I said I wanted summary higher for both the input and display locations, and I set the input row order to be number 20. This is not something that is going to be reportable, so we don't want to say it's a filter or a group by. One of the things that I probably didn't do on this particular form, which you'll want to do for these read-only ones, is to uncheck the enable as a column, because you don't want this to be listed in your report filters as a column to put on your form. Then if we go over to the Advanced tab, this is where we can put the stylings in for this particular read-only field. So one of the things that I found helpful is that in the display name that you just repeat the name of the field here in exactly the format that you want to see it. So I put general information in there as well. Then in order to format the cell, and since it's a read-only, the cell is just the entire thing, I put in a background. So we got this hexadecimal color here off of a Photoshop color picker, and it is a light blue. So then I also wanted to stylize the text. So I went into the header text style, and I said I wanted it, the weight to be bold and the color to be a dark blue, and also selected a hexadecimal color off of a color wheel picker of some sort. Since I want this particular field to go across the entire form and not have anything else on that same row, is I put the input column span as 4, which our forms are 4 columns wide. So if you don't put 4, then they'll kind of put things next to each other until you get 4 columns. So I said I want to column span at 4. Since this is a header row with some styling, I don't want to show the labels colon. So I said hide that. And then I did the same thing for this display. So anytime we say input, that's the add edit form, and then display is the page that you look at it on. So I did the same thing here. I said I want to column span 4 on the display page, and then also hide the colon. So when I save that, this is how it comes out. It's got general information in all caps. It's got that light blue background, and it's got a dark blue text, and it's column spanning over all 4 of the columns on this display page form. If I look at my add edit form, I did the same thing. So it's going across all the columns here on the form and doing pretty much exactly the same thing as we did on the display. On my field numbering, you can see that I don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because if I ever want to edit this form and insert a field somewhere, I have some room to do so. So a couple of things that on these other fields here, the person requesting is just a normal field. It's summary tab high because we want it at the top of the form. And in this case, we do want to show it as a column on a report. And this really doesn't have any extra formatting. So this is just a normal field. Where this comes into play is on the third, because in my form, I only have 3 fields. So I've got 1, 2, 3. I don't have 4. So I don't want this description to be stuck over here. So on my last field, which is the phone number, if I edit that and I go to my advanced tab, I said I want to column span that too, because I want it to take up the last 2 columns. So a 4th column does not end up getting stuck in there on my display page. Since it was stacked in the add edit page, I didn't really need to do that on the add edit page. So that is how I got it to only have 3 columns on this row instead of 4. Then what I have next is this description. And for the description, you can see I use a condensed HTML editor. It's kind of a nice thing to do because you can add formatting and formatted text and bullet points and things like that in there. So in this case, typically you don't want to enable that as a column either, because it really is a very big set of data that kind of messes up your reports look and feel, but you may want to have it on there. It's your choice. So a couple of things on this, and is because we want the HTML box to kind of take up the entire form as well on that particular row. So in order to do that, I said the input and display label orientations are top align left. So if I go into my add edit form, you can see that my description is top aligned to the field, and it's on the left-hand side. Since I did not set the alignment for the labels on these 3 fields, they come out in the standard label and then the input box, label input box, label input box. But I wanted this one to kind of go over the entire set, because I didn't want anything to the right of it either. And I wanted it to kind of look like a regular form. So I said I want to align the labels top and left. And then on the input control CSS style, this is where I was going to control the width of this table and the height of it. Since the width of it is usually really big and the height of it is something like 400 or 500 pixels, we wanted to truncate that down so it was a little bit more reasonable to type into. So I put in the control input CSS style text, because I'm looking at the input. I said I want the width to be 700 pixels and the height to only be 200 pixels. I can change these and make the height bigger, smaller, and I can make the width wider or thinner. So that kind of controls how the box. This is good for HTML editors, text area boxes, stuff like that. Also, if you have a text box that The standard width of that is 100 pixels, and a lot of times that's not enough to see all of the text in there. You may want to make that 800 or 900 wide so you can see whatever you're typing in there if it's like a whole sentence or something. You
So
can
I have
see
a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So the header sections are like the labels that we've talked about. So if you wanted to make a header that kind of separates the sections, you'll pick that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the control is like the field that you're typing stuff into. Is that the difference between the two?
Yeah. So the cell is what is the cell itself inside of it, and the input is what you just said, which is what does it look like for the area that I'm going to input, and then the header is always the label.
Okay. So do you know what the input CSS and display CSS class box does up there, or do you usually ignore that?
I usually ignore these. I have
Okay.
not used them.
Okay. No need.
To do
I
the
like it.
forms that I've done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I wanted to make the text on this red, I would say bold, and I'm going to just come over here and make this a red color. So I know CC0000 happens to be a red one. Don't hold that against me that I know some hexadecimal color. The input column span and the display column span, again, I just want this all on one row. I don't want anything else in it, so I did the column spans for that as well. If I go and save this and then I refresh my page, you can see my description box header or label changed to red. That's the red color I put in there in the hexadecimal.
That makes sense.
Now, a couple of other things you can see down here, there's a radio button list. So I have a radio button list, which is this one right here, reason for the change. And if I edit it, this is a fairly standard field where I put my values in here. And again, you can see my order I put in tens so that if I ever had to insert something, I had some room to do so without changing all of them. And one of the other things that I want to show you on this that is for multiple checkboxes or for radio button lists is that you can say where your text aligns. So is it buttons first and then text, or is it text first and then buttons? And then also, which way do you want to go? The default is vertical, so my choices would have been one line break, next, line break, next, line break. I didn't really want it that way because it makes your form longer when I could actually just do it across the page. So I made it horizontal, and then I also wanted the input label to be on the top and the left so that it would be kind of like that HTML box where you have the label and then you have the list of stuff you could select underneath it. So when I take a look at this, you can see that I said I want my text on the right. So it's button and then text, button, text. And then my header label for this is at the top and the items are below. Otherwise, if I didn't select top align left, it would have been label and then all of the values out here. And the reason I like this is it gives you a little bit more real estate, especially, I don't know if 5 of these would have wrapped, but if you have too many choices, then it could wrap on you. And then I've got a text area here, and I just know that because it has no HTML editing on it. So if I cancel out of this, you'll see that I've got, if I pick other, I want you to put in what the details are. There's no logic that it shows up if I pick other or anything like that. It's just there, kind of like a paper form would be that, hey, if I picked other, then fill in this other box. I also use the column span on that to go across the entire page, 700 pixels wide, which I defined with this HTML text box. So then I entered in another section break, if you will, and I did that for the project and or task information, exactly the way that I did up here for the general information bar. So it's exactly the same. It's just that the order where it appears on the page and the text that's in it is different. Then these are two new fields that just came out in 2018. I think they came out in February. And this is the project affiliation and task affiliation. These two fields allow you to create your own custom forms that may feed into either a task or a project. In Project Insight, we have two main forms that do that. One is called a project request form, and another one is called proposal. And then you could also do that with issues and promote them to tasks at least. But this allows you to create your own custom form for different kinds of intakes. I call it a tactical request because it may be for, hey, I've got this request to update the website, and we don't really want a project request form for that, and we don't want to put that stuff in our issues. So I just create a form, and that's how people submit requests for website changes, say. So this one is just a normal set of parameters for this particular task input control type. It is a project affiliation selector. And the only thing I did differently on this was that I said, actually, I didn't do anything differently on this. So it's just that I want it to be a filter, or I want it to be a group by, in case I do multiples of these for, say, operational projects is a good use for a form like this. And the task affiliation selector is the same thing, except it's for a task. Now, one caveat with the task affiliation selector is that you cannot create a task unless there's a project picked. So you can't select that unless you first pick the project. Otherwise, there could be tens of thousands of tasks and your list would be extremely long, and that would be hard to load. So you can see on my created form, I can create a project off of this particular form, or if I edit it, I can say, I'm going to go to this project, and when I do that, then you can see I can create a task now because it has a project to put it inside of. So you saw that it was blank when there is no project affiliation available. So I could have either created a new project, or I could pick an existing project, which might be, say, like an operational. I work with a client where they do the website stuff, and they have an operational website project. So when they get one of these in there and they're going to approve it, then they select the website maintenance project, and they create a task that is off of this form, and it's all correlated together then. So they can see what form was approved to create this task, which would then ended up with a change to the website. So that's a nice little feature that we added in the last few months. So that's the basics of doing a pretty simple form. There are other things that you can do on the forms. You can do forms that say these headers are colored and maybe have borders on them and things like that. It's all normal CSS type stuff. So if you know CSS, or there are a bunch of W3C and HTML5 CSS cheat sheets out there that give you all the syntax for entering in those values on the field advanced tab here in the administration. So that's it.